Okay, you can hear now? Everything's good? Okay, good. We just admit someone else. So if you're just coming in, welcome, Chris. You can put your name in the chat box if you have, or your city and town. Keep your mic muted, your video off, and we're starting the recording. So I'm Dina Churchill, and I'm the convener for the Atlantic Common Law Assembly. I was a chiropractor for 22 years, had my license suspended because of speaking vaccine truths and dangers, injuries that I'd seen in my practice. So that was sort of my opening to understanding the dysfunction in the current system. Spent 2 years emailing MLAs in New Brunswick and in Nova Scotia, really to have nobody hear what I was saying. Got very depressed until I found common law and realized that there was another way. So once I let go of that old paradigm and system, I was feeling renewed energy, inspiration, and enthusiasm in learning about common law when I met with Kevin a few months ago. And on September the 18th, we formed the Atlantic Common Law Assembly. We had 28 members sign our charter and 8 in proxy. And we've just been learning and growing ever since. So welcome to the call, and welcome to Kevin Annett.
Hi.
So maybe I'll just introduce you again, Kevin. You know, I do this every week because we do these calls every Wednesday at 7. So if you're interested in learning about the Zoom links, you can connect with Charlene, who's our administrator. She'll put her email in the chat box, and then you can be notified when the Zoom's happening. But Kevin, again, Nobel Peace Prize nominee, 2014-15, recipient of the Prague Peace Award, community minister, human rights consultant, special advisor to the International Tribunal of Crimes Against Church and Crimes of Church and State, a filmmaker, lecturer, broadcaster. He has a degree in anthropology. He has a master's in divinity, and he has a master's in political science. So he's really a great man to bring together, you know, God, man, and the land, I think. Organized the first public inquiries into crimes against Canadian residential schools, and that was in 1998, and again was a chief advisor to the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels in its 2 criminal cases against the Vatican, the Crown of England, Canada and its churches for crimes against humanity. He forced the resignation of Pope Benedict and other sex offending friends. So that was Kevin's biography, taken from his book called The Common Law Training Manual that you can find at murderbydecree.com. Is that right, Kevin?
That's it. Thanks, Dina.
So welcome to the call. We've titled it Sovereignty is Our Success. Do you have any opening platform or any opening remarks that you'd like to share about that?
Well, I was thinking about that, and you know, like sovereignty is an idea, like it's thrown around a lot. These words are used a lot. And the other day somebody said, well, they went to court over a family matter and was told by the judge that common law no longer operates in Canadian courts. And I say, well, really, how did that happen? Right. But the point is that things can be claimed, including the use of the word sovereignty, and we have to really understand what the meaning is behind it, how the people who are using it mean the word, because it can be used in many different ways depending on who's saying it, right? So for us, I think a really important operating understanding of the word sovereignty is simply its self-governance. That is, to say you're sovereign is to declare the way you're born naturally. You're born free and self-governing. And if you don't consciously surrender that, there is no authority over you. People can be forced to surrender it unknowingly, like when you're registered at birth, when you just live with certain assumptions, like you've got to obey the law. No, you don't. You don't have to obey the law if you disagree with it, and you're not harming anyone. I mean, so it always boils down to the question of who has the authority. It always boils down to a question of power and who owns it. And so I think that's a good way to approach the whole thing, because I often ask people in the assemblies, I've set up 10 assemblies in British Columbia. And the first question we always ask people is, don't ask us if this is lawful and legitimate what we're doing. Ask yourself, do you think it is? Do you think you have the lawful, legitimate authority to do what you're doing? Because if you don't, then why are you here, really? I mean, if you have to believe that in yourself in order to take the step. And that's really a stumbling block for a lot of people, because a lot of people will enthusiastically say, yeah, I want to be part of an assembly. But then we say, okay, well, we passed a law outlawing the COVID measures. Now we have to enforce it. And they go, oh, really? We do? I mean, I have to go up against the state? Okay, wait a minute here. And people start getting cold feet. That's because they haven't gained sovereignty over their own minds, their own thinking. And we don't have that. The other stuff is just a lot of talk. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's pretty basic to everything we do these days. You know?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good start, talking about the definition of sovereignty. We had been discussing that in a working group in the assembly, and some people had felt it was freedom from control. But again, if you look at it as authority for your own existence and your own governance, it's a different mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not trying to get away from something, you're actually sort of standing in your power.
Yeah, and the way that was described, freedom from something, that's only half the one side of the coin, because what goes with liberty is responsibility. And are you responsible for yourself and the society around you, or are you just worried about your personal rights? I mean, it's bigger than just, and that's a big focus, of course, these days for people, because we're dealing with a police state, right? And there's a big focus on how do we resist this, how do we hold on to our rights, but it's bigger than that. And that's why the question ultimately is always posed of the republic. What is the general framework we need for all this? You can't talk about common law assemblies without talking about a republic, because you've drawn a line and you've declared your independence from the system. And then you have to say, well, then what's our alternative? Because that's what you're always asked by people. What do you want to set up in this place, right? So that's also an issue, but yeah.
Well, and Norm had a great question. Norm's in that working group. He had suggested, posing the question of why we want to become sovereign, because then you sort of see what motivates the person and what their mindset is. Mm-hmm. Some might be my thought is, some are just looking for another authority. They're just wanting you to tell them what to do. So yeah. It's, I think that was a valid question. I don't know if you have a comment on that, Norm, because you were the one that posed it. But the other question that Kirsten had came up with, or a comment, was that education has been used against us, so that enslaving us in different systems. So do you have a suggestion? If somebody's just coming on the call now, they have no idea of what common law is, how would you explain to them what common law is and what steps they can start taking? What practical steps, like right now today, besides shifting your mindset into you own your power, what practical steps could they take to help work towards a more sovereign existence?
Well, common law is the law of nature as applied to men and women. How we govern ourselves to ensure our peace, our liberty, the harmony of our communities, the protection of our children, all of those things that we all believe in, hopefully. And it's also the body of law that's come out of that to ensure those things. And however, once that's said, it's always a question of how do people change their thinking? It doesn't happen in the abstract, it happens through experiences. So people are changing their thinking now about Canada because they're seeing that suddenly everybody's got to put a muzzle on and everybody's controlled, and it's not the society we thought we lived in, right? And there's this shock effect, and people are still kind of in a state of numbness and disorientation and panic. And I see that a lot, and so we're going through an experience, but we're learning from it. The advantage of this is that we're learning a big lesson, and that is we're not in the same society anymore, and there's no going back. They're not going to suddenly say, hey folks, it's all over, you don't have to distance anymore. No, this is part of a bigger game plan of global control. And so we have to, that's waking a lot of people up. But then, the old saying is people change things with their eyes on the past. We're always wanting to go back to the way things were, to what we once knew. And it's hard for people to think in a new way. And there's always references being made, like you just said, well, you lead us, or you give us the blueprint and we'll follow it. There's still that kind of deferring of authority all the time that happens. even among people who consider themselves awake and aware of a lot of things, the habits are very ingrained, right? And it's like body memory too, right? It's like these things are kind of wired into us, and it's deeper than we think, and it keeps manifesting all the time. So part of what we do in the assemblies and in the work we do out in the world is we help people break from that in practice, and then take them to the next step, which is talking about how we can organize it so that power remains in the hands of people through our own courts, our own assemblies. And that was really, you know, in the American Republic, the idea why they had the separation of powers, the judicial, the legislative, the executive. Each was supposed to balance the other out. The court could knock down decisions of the government or the president, right, that were going against the interests of the Constitution. The Constitution's the ultimate authority. We don't, we have to create it, and that's one of the jobs in the local assemblies, to work on that as well. But I don't know, maybe I wandered a bit there, but that's kind of a general take I had on it.
So besides, what about somebody who's not in an assembly right now? Is there somebody, you know, they're listening and they're not registered with an assembly? What are some practical things they could do personally to pull away from that dysfunctional system and regain their own?
Well, I mean, there is people can go just so far with their individual action and awareness, and there is a certain education that we encourage in people, reading the books, listening to our Sunday show, connecting with networks like yours, and but then in a practical level, what we say to people is, if there's no assembly, find 2 other people and form a cell of 3, and those 3 people can be mutually supportive for one another and can be there with each other when something happens. And on the basis of those cell groups, then you form assemblies. You get 4 of them together. You've got 12 people, sign a charter, and then it's kind of rooted more in people's own, you know, interaction with each other. It isn't just 12 strangers meeting and then having to work together. We find when that happens, it tends to fall apart quicker, because you know, if you don't know someone, fear and suspicion can set in really easily, and we find that happens. It's easy to stoke that. You know, so yeah, I would say try to find 2 others, start working, and the important thing is stay connected so they can see there's something bigger going on. I get emails like that every day, people saying, you know, you guys have given me such hope. I thought I was all alone. And just connecting people. Often, you know, give you an example. In Calgary, there's now probably, I think on last count, 58 people who said they want to come together. And I keep writing to them and saying, okay, does someone want to offer their home? Is someone, and nobody will, right? It's like everyone, I don't know why that is, but I don't want to pick on Calgary, but the point is, that's one example. Somebody has to be able to take the leadership and say, okay, we're going to meet, here's what's going to happen. And I find a lot of people holding back on that right still, so that's a problem.
So we did have a question down here.
Yeah.
People are scary, Diane says. Boo! It's my favorite thing to do.
Especially Halloween coming up.
Yes, so there was a question, and I think I wrote it down, but I've missed it here, from Wayne. And he says, if you could explain the difference between legal and lawful, and why the natives have no rights.
Under Canadian law, Indians on reservations are not citizens. They're wards of the state. In perpetuity is the language. It means until the end of time, you live on an Indian reservation and you're a ward of the state, which means you're like a child or a mentally incompetent person under the law. You can't conduct your own affairs. You can't open a bank account. You can't make a renovation to your house. You're a dependency, right? They've simply taken that and applied it to everyone now. I mean, they're really applying, it isn't even emergency powers we're living under. We're really living under the Indian Act applied to everyone, where you're a dependency of the state. You're not a citizen in your own right. And that's inherent in the term subject of the crown, right? So, yeah, it says you have to make the Indian Act void. We've tried, but the biggest obstacle to that are the Aboriginal people themselves, because their top chiefs are all making money off the Indian Act. They get the money, right? So none of them want to end in the Indian Act. It's feathering their nest. Most of the natives on the ground, 3/4 of Indians live off reserve. But the catch-22 is when you're living off reserve, you don't have access to the benefits. You're just subject to poverty and disease and all sorts of stuff. And that's kind of, to go get those benefits on reserve, then you're basically in a banana republic and you have no rights. That's the whole native thing. Legal and lawful, traditionally that means something is lawful when it's a law that agrees with, it's when statute agrees with natural law. So the natural or moral law that says you can't harm each other or you can't take away my rights, right? When it squares with a statute that the government brings in, then it's lawful, it's just and right, it's a du jour law. But when something goes against natural law, it can be legal but not lawful, and we have the right to walk away from it. So Oliver Wendell Holmes in the US Supreme Court said time and again in 3 different decisions, he said, statute without consent is not binding on the citizens. So you can bring in a statute, but if you say, no, wait a minute, I don't agree with this, it's wrong, it's not binding on you. And many court cases have been won in America where they've simply said, I don't consent to the statute and I'm not harming anyone, so it doesn't apply to me. And so lawfulness is the bottom, it gives the substance to a law. Something can be legal, like, the classic case is genocide in Canada was legal. Hitler's regime was legal, of course, but it wasn't lawful. Okay, so that's usually the distinction we make.
So I have something interesting. We were at the rally in Fredericton, New Brunswick on the weekend, and I met 2 Indian chiefs. One was a heredity chief that can trace his lineage back to the 1700s. So he was telling me, he gave me all this great information, a Micmac clan mother button and all this great information. But he said that there's 33 reserves in Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick. And these Indian agents, right, these Indian chiefs that are appointed by the government, get like $1 billion, while the people on the reserve are living in poverty conditions like third world countries.
Yep.
So somebody had asked the question, if we join forces, right? Yep. Indigenous, he said he likes the word Micmac, French and English, could they maintain sovereignty in our Atlantic common law program? Okay, that's encouraging.
Yeah, if you look in that book, The Case for Canada, we talk about Quebec and Indigenous people as 2, traditionally sovereign nations within Confederation. What we say is that Canada is for non-native people in Canada. Native people have their own traditions of sovereignty, and we want to be like that Tuara Wampum symbol on the flag, in partnership, in equal partnership, according to the Tuara Wampum. That means that an Indigenous nation can affiliate with Canada and be an equal partner, but they don't have to be. They can stand outside it. We urge them to be. It's kind of like the way Yugoslavia used to be. It was a confederation of different nations and equal status in their legislature. And so one of the models put forward in eventually in a Congress for a republic would be, it'd be like a separate House of Indigenous representatives that would have veto power over matters having to do with their people, right? So working out a partnership on that basis. So yeah, I mean, for now, anyone, including Native person, can take out citizenship. Eventually, we want to set up, we got to get rid of all the traditions of colonialism in Canada, the Indian Act, the RCMP, the puppet Native organizations, all of those things, and then restructure it according to folks like the ones you met. Get their input as to what real partnership would look like, because we've never had it. We've got to invent it. And it's very exciting because it means, we can go back to the way it should have been from the beginning, right?
Yeah, I heard that comment from a member on the weekend was, there's not anybody out there, any leader out there, Kevin, or any of the other leaders in global law, a global movement of common law, telling us how to do this. And I'm like, well, we've never done this ever before in history, probably. You can't look it up on page 23. I mean, we're creating it, right, as we move through. So, I'm excited. These 2 chiefs are going to be at the Moncton rally this weekend. So there's a freedom rally at 1 o'clock City Hall, Moncton, for those who are listening. And, we'll see what kind of partnership and ideas, but they were just brilliant to talk to, and how they hold women so highly in their system. As we were walking, they were even like a half a step behind me, just sort of giving me respect. And it was just awe-inspiring, really, to be in their presence.
A couple of things on that too. In my book, murderbydecree.com, there's a copy of the letter from Amherst, Nova Scotia, is named after General Jeffrey Amherst, who defeated the French in the French Indian Wars. He's held up as this big hero in England, right? He sent out the letter to his Major Bouquet, his subordinate, telling him to take smallpox blankets from in the British Army hospitals and take them out among the Mi'kmaq to infect them with smallpox. And Governor Charles Lawrence in 1748 in Nova Scotia brought in a scalping proclamation offering 2 guineas for a scalp of a Mi'kmaq and 1 for a woman or child. And according to, in 1999, when I spoke at Dalhousie, somebody there said that law was still on the books. I'd be curious if somebody would ask somebody in the Nova Scotia legislature, is the scalping proclamation of Governor Charles Lawrence, 1748, still on the books, right? That's some, I just thought I should mention that as well. Also, the term Indian, if you look at in the diary of Christopher Columbus that he kept after the first contact, he referred to them, the natives in the Caribbean, as Indios. In Dios means in God or of God. He said these people are very godlike, as we show them our swords and they cut their hands on it. They didn't know what a weapon was. And he said they should make excellent slaves because they have no religion. They're all equal, right? And so the point is, Indian originally came from Columbus's saying these are people of God. You know, they're better Christians than we are. He would say that. So Jean Cabot in Eastern Canada, he said that all the time. So later, obviously, the system doesn't want to say, oh, these people were wiping out our children of God. No, he was referring to India, you know, and that's kind of the dogma that's settled in. But no, according to the diary, that term Indian meant of God, in Dios, in Spanish, in Latin. So.
Yeah, well, they were wonderful people. And Andrew asked, were they going to be at the rally this weekend? Yes, they will, Andrew. And I have a standing date with them. So we can all meet them and talk with them and share. So any other questions? I'll go to the chat box first. We did have a question that came in from one of our members asking us how not to pay HST and taxes to the government. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that again. I know you did it in a previous Zoom, but yeah, just the whole shape of the income tax.
You can, well, 2 things. You can arrange with your employer to opt out, so they don't have to deduct tax from your paycheck. That's one thing. But also, and I've got to remember the citation on this, there have been court cases in Canada, one where local businesses don't charge tax. They simply don't. And maybe other people know how to do that. It's been a few years since I saw the reference, so I could look it up. But there have been cases brought, I think one right up to the Supreme Court, and HST and PST were successfully challenged, saying no, because you have to ask what's the legislative basis for their authority to impose tax. And they can't point to it because, unlike America, there isn't a law imposing taxes. They're just usually ordered by the Privy Council or provincial governments, or they're just brought in. So that's why they're flexible, because they know they don't have a legislative leg to stand on, right? Or legal leg to stand on.
Because part of the resistance that the council's recommending, the National Common Law Assemblies,
yes.
were, again, not to pay taxes, not to vote in the elections, and also to, resist any COVID measures, right? Measures. So those are 3 things that you've recommended as of October 1st, right?
That's right. Not only resist, well, resistance doesn't mean not just cooperate. It's to tell people, the police or anyone trying to force a mask on you, is you're going to be held personally liable in a common law court if you carry on. So it's actually indicting the system. It isn't simply not cooperating. It's also taking the next step, which is we become the law and say we're going to charge you. And that's part of the thing about sovereignty. It means taking back that sovereignty actively. And that's the part that's a bit more challenging for people, but that it's also a great ray of light when people hear we can do that, right? And great encouragement. So yeah, all of that.
What you'd mentioned, I think, in the last Zoom last week was a case where somebody had shown the measure, right, the outlaw measure, the law that
Yeah.
was passed September 8th, to a police officer, and the police officer had backed down once they seen this
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
So if we can print these and carry them with us, along with our citizen card, this should be protection and another way to kind
It
of
is.
maintain.
It was a police sergeant in Victoria, British Columbia, and Fiona, one of the organizers there, went to him and said, "What do I do if somebody forces a mask on me?" He read it. He read the September 8th law, and he said, "Just show this to them." So the cop is recognizing that this is a legitimate law because it's passed by people. You see, the will of the people in assembly has power. It has authority, and that's the English common law tradition. They're not allowed to tell you that because it's undermining their authority, but they can't deny it once you put it in their face. They're just relying on people's fear and ignorance. Once we get around that, they have no power over us. That's the incredible thing we're up to here. You know?
The Republic of Canada citizenship card that I printed from the website, we have somebody here locally, one of our members, that's going to print sort of little plastic cards to have a membership card for us. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, good.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
So
That'd be great.
maybe you could, you know, if somebody is not already registered or not in an assembly, they can still apply for citizenship. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. Even if there's no assembly, like I mentioned before, take out citizenship, find two others who do, and form a cell group of 3. And that's really the smallest unit in our whole movement. And that's kind of the building block of the assembly, to do it that way. We find that's a lot more successful than it's like herding cats to get 12 strangers together to get all on the same wavelengths and believe, you know. But start with 2 people you know. And I just got this great one. I got an email back and there was 8 of these things filled out. And she said, woman in Calgary, our whole family signed, you know, from the 12-year-old up. We're all on board now. We're all citizens. It's great. I said, well, you're off to the races. Let's go, right?
Yeah, I printed 2 for my kids to sign too.
Good.
But we have had some inquiries from Quebec. I think we have 3 or 4 people right now in Quebec, and there's not one person wanting to be a leader right now. But as part of our Atlantic Common Law Assembly, we've sort of invited people in to come, listen, learn with us, and then they can set up their own, like you said, little cell where they are in their community, but they can still sort of utilize what we've created. So that's happening. And the same in Alberta. We have 4 members now, I think. Charlene, correct me, but I think 4 members. And in Alberta, Nicola is kind of the contact person. Craig and Renata in Newfoundland are the contact people, and Norm and Gerald in New Brunswick. So we're starting to kind of see people come together in different communities, which is really amazing.
It's great.
I listened to
the folks in,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, the folks in Alberta and Quebec, get them to write to me. I can plug them into all of the contacts there. The language issue we're gradually getting around because we've already got a translator. If you go to republicofcanada.ca, you'll see there's a Francais section that we're beginning to put stuff into, and including the flyers and that have been translated. So again, it requires somebody to take the reins and hold a meeting and start things going, right? Sorry, Dina, go ahead.
I'm just reading the comments. Wendell says, Kevin, you mentioned Amherst a while back. There was a campaign to remove the H from Amherst, and someone in the audience said there were a lot of people that would like to get the H out of Amherst. So thanks for that little bit, Wendell. Should we pass the law in our assembly? I missed the which law, Andrew? The one that was passed September 8th. Maybe you can qualify that. Norm says sovereignty, self-determination. Diane used the word cell. Can we not use the word cell? I guess you can do anything. You have the power. You can use a different word. Black's Law Dictionary.
Call it whatever you like, but
you can call it a pod.
Like cell in a body.
You can call it
cell in a body. You know, one cell in an organic in a living body, right?
Good. Chris is from Amherst, so that's great. If you want to put the community where you're from, then there may be people on the call that you can connect with. So I just want to say I listened to your radio show and I loved it. And there was a quote by Thomas Paine. Do you have it? Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, these are the times that try men's souls. That one.
Do you know that off by heart?
Almost, but you read it if you've got it there.
Well, I've got to pull out my glasses. Okay. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It's the dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. I love that.
Beautiful. Well, he wrote that in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, in the Christmas of 1776, when Washington's army had shrunk down to like 2,000 guys against 40,000 British soldiers, the best armed army in the world. You know, it's phenomenal. What that pamphlet, it sold like 1 million copies. It was almost as widely read as the Bible. Like everyone in America was reading his stuff, and it literally sparked their morale. Washington made sure everyone got a copy of it because it was the right word at the right time. Yeah. It's kind of like what we're doing now. It's sparking this incredible sense that, yeah, well, we can take back our country, right? So.
Well, that's what I thought about as I was reading today that video that I sent you about the 36,000 units of tear gas they've ordered, and the Department of National Defense has put out a call for riot officers, and all this crazy stuff. You know what? We need to focus upon what we'd love to see, right? We need to kind of focus on that. So. Yep. I thought that was beautiful. Thank you. Let's see if there's any more questions. Sylvia's talking about a meeting. So yeah, if you have any questions, I put my email address up there. Anyone wants to host a meeting, you can contact me. We have somebody from New Germany. Great. Linda, great to see you. Any other questions or comments about sovereignty? I have a joke to fill in while you're thinking.
Good.
George Carlin.
Yep.
So he says, okay, if crime fighters fight crime, did you hear this one? And firefighters fight fires, what do freedom fighters fight? I don't like the term freedom fighter. You know, I think we're more like freedom engulfers, or, you know, freedom living. You know, we have to kind of live that freedom, right? You know, it's natural to us. So why would we have to fight for something that is kind of our inborn, you know,
good point,
birthright?
Just asserting,
yeah, or live in our freedom, live in our freedom, being the change, right, that we want to see. So it was a nice kind of funny joke. I like his one on 10 Commandments. If you haven't seen that one, have you? I'm going to send it to you.
Oh yeah, he does a really good one called "Religion is Bullshit," and yeah, I like that one.
As a reverend, and a former reverend in the United Church, you know, you'll probably get a kick out of that one.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if there's any more questions. Could Kevin comment on whether Canada is independent of the UN and also the World Economic Forum? Then compare the relationship to the Republic of Canada with the same or the other. Thank you, Ernest.
No, Canada's in bed with all of those international corporate bodies. And in the proposed constitution that's been circulating since 2015 for Canada, in its foreign relations, it withdraws from all of these International Monetary Fund, the United Nations. It basically cuts off all of those connections with globalist organizations and establishes connections with other indigenous nations, sovereign republics that are established around the world. So we establish our own ties, you know, and like internally with the different indigenous nations who have been internal colonies, right, of the crown. We help bring those nations into being, and we have our own relationships, in other words, based on universal recognition of common law and people's self-governance, innate self-governance. Where's this constitution? It's right in in the book, The Case for Canada, and some of these are on their way. Put them in the mail to Dina. And you can also get them, just go to murderbydecree.com. It's how you can get one, but you can order them out of there. But again, this stuff is all a work in progress. The things you see in the books, they're being debated, modified. In your assembly, come up with an alternative if you don't like stuff. I mean, you know, it's all in our hands, right?
Somebody just asked, Bishop asked me if I had forwarded his completed Republic of Canada citizenship card to Kevin. So the process for that would be to go on the Republic of Canada website to download that. And I actually included that in our last email to our membership, to print it off, to sign it, take a picture of it, and then you can send it back to the Canada address. Is that correct, Kevin?
That's right. You go to republicofcanada.ca, and on the headline Oath of Citizenship, it's right there. There's a PDF of it. You can print it off right there and do it. Now, if you have these citizenship cards, Dina, they could also send them to you. So why don't we just say anyone in the Maritimes, send them to you, and anywhere else for now, send them to the, you know, Republic of Canada Gmail address, and they'll get the card in the mail, their citizenship card.
Great. So can you repeat that again? So if they send me the completed
the PDF from
with their signature,
you can then issue a card to them. You mail it back, and they sign it. You see on the card, you print it and sign it on both sides. Print, sign, and that makes it yours. So just send them the card. Yeah.
Maybe you could send me some of those, or if I could.
If you're going to print them off yourself, you said.
Oh, okay.
You said you could.
We do have somebody that's, yes. Kirsten is going to actually make plastic cards, and we're going to use it. We're going to sell them and use it as a fundraiser for the assembly. So.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. They've got to be signed, or they're not valid, right?
Okay.
So you might want to think of printing this off as just a paper card, and then, like I've done with mine, you just laminate it after. But it's got to have your signature on it.
Right. Okay.
And we also don't want to just hand these out en masse, because when people take out citizenship, it's a commitment. They take a pledge. They've got to know what they're joining. And, you know, let's say somebody flashes a card and a cop says, "What is this?" And if you can't defend what it is, it kind of loses its purpose, right? Its meaning. So
maybe Charlene, you could put in the chat box the oath to citizenship link from the Republic of Canada website, and also the link to where we can download. Oh, you have it there. Oh, beautiful. Look, she's already ahead of me. Thank you for that. So there's somebody on the call, talks about Montreal. Anyone interested? Yes, that's great for you to put in your communities so we can link people up. Feel free to use your email, or you can use me as a go-between. I put my email in there. So if you're interested in being kind of the contact person for your area, let me know so we can feed out all the inquiries that we get to you. Can Kevin give us an elevator speech of what we can use when we present the card to a cop? That's a good question. Thanks, Anastasia.
Well, it's written right on here. You just say, I'm a sovereign citizen of the Republic of Canada. I'm outside your jurisdiction. You have no authority over me.
Right.
Why don't you join? Why don't you become a deputized sheriff of the Republic? Seriously, you try to recruit them. I'm also going to do up a little thing, what to say in certain situations. That's long overdue. And that's one of them. What to say, you know, when you show them the card, about asking about anything, right? Just some bullet responses, right?
And we've had the conversation a number of times about terminology and how important it is, you know, to maybe not produce your name or to say something a little differently that can right away kind of shut down any further investigation, right? So I think that would be really
exactly, because once you state that you're under jurisdiction, a different one, you don't have to give a name or anything. I mean, you don't have to anyway, but you're only known by that name in the Crown jurisdiction where you're registered. But when you're outside it, you can call yourself anything you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or nothing. I am.
So we have another question. How do Indigenous peoples retain their distinct identity within the ROK?
They, again, that's talked about in the case for Canada. The proposal is that in a national sense, within the Congress, there'll be a separate chamber of Indigenous peoples where they have kind of like what the Senate is now, but they're consulted, but they have equal voice on matters having to do, let's say, things within their territory. Then they would have that representation. And locally, it's a matter, these things are worked out quite easily in practice locally, right? And it's like what I found doing the work over the years with residential school survivors. It's all about relationships and familiarity with people. And once you come to know people, we start working these things out locally anyway. And that's how you would eventually get that kind of equality that we all want, overcoming this legacy of genocide. You got to do it directly with people. So there isn't any kind of guarantee institutionally that's going to ensure that, but definitely there's got to be an arrangement politically whereby they have veto power over their own matters concerning them. They have equal status within a federation. The republic would really be a federation of equal nations. And I use the Yugoslavia model of something that worked for many years.
So somebody was just mentioning, asking if you heard of Liberland and Somaliland. Are they free nations started by citizens? Are they similar to the Republic of Canada?
I'm not sure. I don't know about them.
Okay. So again, this would be equal, where, the Indigenous people would have kind of an equal status within our Federation of Nations.
That's the idea. Right.
So let's see, any more questions from the chat box? I'll go back to the ones that I have here that were sent in from members. Fundamental misalignment. So civil disobedience, maybe you could talk about that, because I think a lot of people associate that with violence when, maybe we can reframe that.
Well, it's actually the opposite. The spirit of civil disobedience is non-compliance, but non-violent. And the idea is that you absorb the violence of your adversary by not striking back. Gandhi, of course, had a whole spiritual philosophy behind it, as did Martin Luther King. But again, both of them based it on Tolstoy, on Henry David Thoreau in his writings. He wrote the first book on it, on the duty of civil disobedience. He said, when your conscience conflicts with the law being brought in by the government, you have to follow your conscience. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, you don't have a republic. You have compliance with authority, and that's no different than monarchy, right? And so, non-cooperation means that at every level, but it begins inside. It's an inner disposition of non-cooperation with the evil. I mean, this stuff penetrates us at every level. It isn't just that there's these bad things being done to us. To some degree, we cooperate with them. We make them happen ourselves, and we identify with that. We identify with the shadow to some degree, right? And we have to examine ourselves. It's kind of a spiritual cleansing you have to do first, to look at, are we really sovereign? Do we really want to be non-cooperative with the system? And then once we know that, then our actions follow. And at that point, you can't be violent with others, because you're detaching from that whole culture of violence. That's, because the violence is at many levels. We're being violent. Masks are an act of violence. Everything, we're all being assaulted by this violent culture every day, by this system, right? So civil disobedience really is a detachment of that first, and then the something that follows naturally. But in civil disobedience, you're always trying to win over your adversary. You're not trying to defeat them. And that's what Sun Tzu talks about in The Art of War. You're not out to defeat an adversary, but incorporate them, taking their energy and putting it in a new direction.
Yeah.
Right. That's the jujitsu thing you do. You go energetically, right? So.
Well, and I really like the analogy of like instead of fighting something, right? Because fighting, you're assuming a duality where you're creating lots of resistance and energy. But instead, looking at it like a dance, like an amoeba, like you said, we're going to engulfing them.
Right.
And today I had this thought as somebody was asking me about enforcing, policies. And I thought, when you use the word enforce,
Right.
right, you're introducing the idea of fighting, of resistance, of violence. But
Right.
really, for me, it's a consciousness, right? Like when I first got involved in this sort of common law, and we started our assembly, that wasn't my first thought. Was how was I going to enforce it? It was how I was going to live it. It was how I was going to be it.
Right.
It was how I was going to embody the process.
Exactly.
And I think, David Hawkins in Power versus Force talks about that, how he identifies different levels of consciousness, right? And the lower levels of fear and resentment and guilt and shame. And you have to use force in order to move matter through space.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at a higher level of consciousness into kind of a love vibration, and you can hold that vibration, things around you magically manifest. Your thoughts and your actions
True.
and your words create
Very
your
true.
reality. So you don't have to force it. If you're living it, you create that reality for yourself. So I don't know. I just had that little thought.
Well said.
today.
And in fact, that's why on the flag of Canada, it says the slogan is establish liberty. It doesn't say fight for liberty,
That's it.
because what flows out of what you're saying is you establish something and that creates it. You establish in your mind and around you. And that's how you enforce something, by establishing something new.
Okay. Yes. So this is the book, Establish Liberty. And we have another question that says, how do we embody it when we approach people such as school boards, local businesses? I feel like we're ineffective the other day. And if we're planning to go to the trellis, okay, yeah. So I don't know. I have a thought on that. I think we need to move away and from those which cause us that force. So for my chiropractic profession, I loved it dearly. I had to lose my house. But again, for me, maintaining that freedom to speak was more important than the rest. So I think if we kind of reward those who are supporting our humanity and move away from, or again, reprimand those who aren't, I think we create it for ourselves. I don't know if you have a thought on that, Kevin.
Well, again, that's right, along the same lines. If you have a short-term view, you say, okay, well, they didn't agree with us, therefore we've lost. No. What's happened is you have to look at the energy of the situation. You act respectfully. You say, I cannot cooperate with this. I want to educate about this. Appeal to your conscience that these measures are not warranted, they're unlawful and unhealthy. And we want to leave this with you, but we have to let you know that we cannot cooperate with you at all with any of this. I'm withdrawing my children. We are establishing something. We encourage you to be part of it. Just leave it at that. So that way you keep your energy. You keep the chi on your own terms, and you haven't surrendered anything. Of course they're going to react that way because they're operating in the chain of command hierarchical thinking, right? But we're operating in a different way, in a living way. And most people are going to react to that. They may not be able to show it, but inside they're going to agree with you. And then a year down the road, when the atmosphere changes, they'll come over. I mean, it's a living, this is a dynamic river around a rock, water around a rock thing, right? Nothing can stop us because war, that's Sun Tzu again. War is, and this is what we're engaged in war, that it's constant movement. There's no final battle. There's no final victory or defeat. It's a constant process, right? Mm-hmm. We learn from everything. We grow and strategize again.
Well, and if I might comment on the outing that we did in Yarmouth to the school board, and then at Zach Churchill's office where we were holding up our signs, unmask the kids, unmask the kids. But since then, even today, I posted on his Facebook page just a note from another parent, asking them about, what's happening and if there's any science behind the mask wearing, and just really appealing to his public image, which is something that I learned from you with the Pope and that whole thing, right? Is that you have to target their weak points. Right? You have to see their public image, especially for Zach Churchill right now, Minister of Education in Nova Scotia, who's, planning to run for premier. His image is very important right now. Right?
Perfect target. People are vulnerable. Public image and money, always.
And it's not, we're not trying to hurt him. We're just wanting him to be accountable. So what I said on the post was, if people really appreciate and respect a truthful leader. So instead of calling him, something different, I sort of directed him to really what we'd love to see. So again, that's maybe what you talk about with the continuous molding and moving. It's not expecting an action and then a result. It's, really, I guess, disowning or disconnecting from what the final outcome would be and just kind of doing your best in the moment.
Right.
And Norm had a good point here. He says, violence is a misnomer. Violence is a catch-all folk term for the imposition of one will on the other. I love that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fighting is
a
result of irreconcilable wills. So yeah, I love that. That's great. I'm a metaphysical psychologist and bishop in Genesis 2 Church University. So welcome, Bishop. Linda Moore, are we ready to ask for cooperation? I'm not sure what that means, if it's directed towards Kevin. If there's any questions, chat box, a permanent resident. Jay Fraser says, a little comment about Zach Churchill. He says, children were going back to school because parents are going back to work. Yeah, but Zach forgot to mention that they're setting up quarantine centers out in at the airport in Halifax. They're also looking at quarantine centers in St. John's, Newfoundland, and also in Fredericton, New Brunswick. He also forgot to mention that in 2019, June 4th, that the Health Protection Act was amended to include kidnapping your kids, restricting, quarantining them, testing them without parental consent. So they can only apparently, and Tara taught me this, can only do that while we're in a state of emergency. So I guess this is why they have to keep this going now, why they can create that police state where they can override our personal rights and freedoms. Is that right, Kevin?
Well, in one sense, but they're not doing anything to us. We're creating it by complying. Mm-hmm. They are proposing something, we make it happen by complying. We take away compliance, it doesn't happen. It's a bunch of words. And that's why, Frederick Douglass, the freed slave, said the limits of tyrants are defined by the people, how much they're willing to tolerate. If they will have ultimate power, because that's the nature of power, wants to grab more and more constantly. They will have it all if we don't put a limit on it. The power's in our hands to do it. And that's a new idea for people. We think something's being done to us. Mm-hmm. That's a child thinking. That's victim thinking.
Mark says he's a small business owner. He's using the big 5 banks. The feds can steal your money at any time if you owe them money. What do you suggest to bypass that? Like, are the credit unions?
Don't use banks.
What was that?
Don't use banks. My great grandfather used to keep his money in his mattress. He was the richest man in Winnipeg, and he put it all on a mattress.
I love that.
Old Scottish way of doing things, right? But no, but seriously, it isn't just with a bail-in system now. They can seize any savings account to, banks can fix their deficits with your money now legally. So.
Lisa says, I'm a nurse and I need to wear the mask. It's very difficult. And if I don't, I lose my job. How to deal with that if I join the community? I might just answer that because I lost my job, for speaking and for not complying. So there comes a time, and I spoke with another nurse who worked at, she may even be on the call, who worked at Northwood, and she's going to let go of her job. Another VON nurse will let go of her job if they, mandate certain things. So there comes a time when we have to make choices, and they're hard choices. Yep. Again, freedom comes at a premium price. And in our community, Lisa, we're creating this community of unregulated health providers. So we have medical doctors, chiropractors, pharmacists, all sorts of different people in our community. So we hope, to create a place, a safe place where we can provide services unregulated to people and set up sort of a barter system or some sort of a,
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helps.
No, but that's just to jump in here. That's really important because we have to create our liberated zones, right? Because we're creating it's a perfect example of guerrilla war strategy where you take back the energy and you create alternative countercultures. You say, okay, we're not going to be regulated. We've got our own health care here. We've got our own schooling system. That's how the Republic grows up from the grassroots, by doing exactly that. It's really vital to keep doing that everywhere, right?
Well, we're looking at land now, even.
Yeah, even more important.
Andrew's on that. Legal applies to corporation and lawful applies to man and woman. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, that's true as well, but it also overlaps, because don't forget, like, a person under law can refer to a corporation or to a human being. So again, these things overlap, but that's also a good way to make a distinguishing between the two. Yeah.
So we can, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions in the chat box. I appreciate you all being here, because, you know, together we're creating this system and platform for others to see the new quantum digital financial system. All money will go through this, coming to all countries, says Diane. I don't know if you have, I don't think that was a question. I think it was just a comment. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions, other questions for Kevin. We're just coming up upon the hour. Maybe I'll just take a moment to do some announcements that our next meeting, our membership meeting, is going to be October 16th. Again, if you're interested in membership, see Charlene in the chat box. And our Moncton rally is going to be at City Hall Moncton this Saturday at 1 p.m. And then we have our Halifax rally downtown by the Wave at 11:30. And Chris Skye of Mothers Against Social Distancing is going to be there at both rallies. So come out and support. I love the rallies, because not only is it a chance to get together with like-minded hearts and souls, but it's a great time to educate and aggravate and irritate, you know, the current systems. And, you know, people are always around with masks watching, you know, this whole group of people there smiling and laughing and having fun. So I really like those public events. What day is the Halifax rally? The Halifax rally is on Sunday morning at 11:30. And October the 11th. Thanks, Shannon. You can speak to Shannon. Maybe you can put your email in there. Shannon's organizing, and we'll know about both rallies. And she's our sort of public relations person. So Shannon, maybe you can pop your email in there and people can connect with you. Any other questions, comments? I'm a permanent resident. Oh, wait, now here's one here. I'm a permanent resident. So do I still have to apply again? A permanent resident of where, Sylvia? Maybe you can include that.
If she's a permanent resident of Canada, no, she can take out citizenship like anybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Is the government after you? Is the government after you? Are you talking to, is that to Kevin? Kevin, are you hiding out right now?
No, I don't hide. They've been after me for years. So what? It's just threats. If they were going to do anything, they would have done it by now.
Maybe you could talk, some people may have not heard this story before, of how you got interested in common law, and quickly kind of your journey with the residential schools and how you came upon this information.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a nutshell, after getting tossed out of the United Church, and by the way, when you lose your job, as Dina knows, you get a great inner freedom. Yeah, there's more economic insecurity, but inside you feel wonderful. You feel powerful and alive, and I'd recommend it to anyone to get fired without cause for doing the right thing. That happened in '95 to me. And after that, I worked with Native survivors in the first lawsuits being brought in Canada against the churches, United Church, Catholic, Anglican, for the residential school Holocaust. And it didn't work. We kept trying in court cases to indict the Crown for genocide, and the judges kept throwing it out. So we realized we needed to go another route, because the system is not going to indict itself. And so it led over many years. And when we tried in Canada, and then what brought it to a head is after we formed the tribunal in Europe in 2010 and formed common law courts that led to the prosecution and conviction of Ratzinger and Queen Elizabeth, which is another reason why Canada doesn't have valid authority over us, because the so-called head of state is a convicted criminal. And at that point, there's no lawful authority. And so we have to create it. I mean, all of these have led into what we're doing right now, right? But we learned in the hard way that the courts in Canada are total crown appendages. They're not going to rule against, especially nowadays, these measures. And we have to do it ourselves. So that's kind of like the Coles Notes version. But there's a lot more to it. And I'm going to be doing some more videos on this just to provide background for people.
And you do have some great videos already. Unrepentance. I don't know, Charlene, if you have that link that you could include, but that was an amazing video for me to sort of see who you were as a person.
That's absurd. Murderbydecree.com has the link, and also at the bottom of my email, the link to Unrepentant. That was our documentary in 2006. We did.
And the other website, Charlene, you might pop up there again to the Republic of Canada. Any other questions, comments? Maybe we'll start thinking about sort of closing remarks or comments and sign out. I just want to thank you again all for being here, because it's you that really developed this platform for public that are going to be watching. Any other questions that you think the public may want to know? Anyone who's seeing this for the first time, you can put in those thoughts. Oh, Norm has a question. How many of you are success oriented? Oh, I think that was for the group here. Thank you, Lisa. Lise, great to have you. And, you know, it's really hard when you're having to make a choice between, you know, your job and your health, or sending your kids to school and their health. But it's, as Kevin said, you know, it's worth it because you're able to sleep at night. 2 years ago, I gave up thinking and worrying about what other people thought. And I start living for my own truth. And when you're aligned with that truth, you know, you're, as Kevin says, an unstoppable breed, right? You just sort of click into something in your DNA and it just opens up kind of that love and wisdom. And, you know, you realize, I think that the harder you're persecuted, you know, I don't think adversity is a curse, because I think that the brightest stars are the ones that are tested in the furnace of tribulation. I think old man, you know, said that, or someone, but it's just like it grooms you to a new level of awareness, you know, the more pain you endure. So I hope, you know, if you want to come with us, we don't have a nurse yet in our group, so we'd love to have you. Let's see. Do I need to reapply for my PR card, or can I let my PR card go?
PR.
I don't know. PR card means public relations. I don't know. Maybe you could explain that, Sylvia. We're talking about opening the border tomorrow from
permanent resident.
Permanent resident. Okay.
Oh, I'm curious. Does it have a capital name in it? Permanent resident card, because if so, you can just ignore it. Okay.
I think this is Vonda says they're talking about opening the border tomorrow, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. So I went to New Brunswick last weekend. I drove through and I didn't have a problem. They had little people set up there, but I just kind of drove through. So the border's open. I love these videos. Thank you. No quarantine resident, permanent resident. Okay. Okay. I'm just now catching up to that.
The capital name thing.
Yeah.
It's a corporate, it's not you. A capitalized name is a corporate title given to you when you were registered at birth by your parents or whoever. And it refers to a corporation acting in your name, and it's not you. Okay, it's not you, the flesh and blood man or woman. So in a nutshell.
And you mentioned that in another video. I don't know if Wayne was on that one, about the vital statistics. Just getting a copy of your live birth, is that right?
Yeah, there's before your birth certificate came the registration of live birth. And usually in every province, the Vital Stats has a copy of when you were first born. And you get that as proof, and it's not in capital letters. It's prior to the birth certificate, which some people read as birth, B-E-R-T-H, birth in a ship. We're under Admiralty law, and you have a little slot in the ship called Canada, where you're just rowing your, or like a good slave, right? Anyway, that's kind of the idea.
Good. So if there's no other questions, immigrant from Switzerland. Thank you, Sylvia. Where is this stated? I don't know if that's...
It's implied. It's implied, and a judge will tell you the same thing in court if you ever push the matter. There's lots written on capitalized names. One thing, we can have a whole class on this. The capitalized letter referred to a slave. Capitis diminutia maxima in Latin. The maximum diminishing of authority is represented by capitalized letter. It means your property. It means you're something owned by somebody else.
I had a question today from a man who says, you know, I have to wear a mask at my workplace. And I said, well, you know, I haven't really wore one yet, but, you know, again, the same reply is that, you know, you have to make choices about what you're willing to succumb to. Because as you mentioned, I don't know the quote that you mentioned, but they'll only put upon us what we accept.
What we're willing to. Frederick Douglass.
We're actually doing it to ourselves.
We are.
This is another idea I had about our taxes, right? I've mentioned this before, but we're paying the government for all these flu shots that are giving us the coronavirus. We're paying for the politicians' salaries that are lying to us, right? And we're paying for the tear gas or whatever it is that they've ordered, the 36 units, through our taxes. So I think the simple solution right away is just stop paying taxes, defund them, and then
pull the plug.
They won't have any money to hurt us. Oh,
exactly. But that's to take responsibility. And that's something we're not used to doing.
Yeah.
That's the mark of a slave. You don't know how to take responsibility. It doesn't even occur to you that you're able to. But we can't get the brain working for the first time in a way, right?
It is.
The inner, the resolve, the soul, right?
So the RCMP.
What about them?
What was the purpose of the RCMP? I mean, why were they first developed? I mean, why did they first come into?
To make sure the railway went across the country. In 1874, the Royal Northwest Mounted Police were created with national jurisdiction as a military society, and still is. It's like a paramilitary group. And it was to ensure the railway went across the country, and their mandate was to clear 50 miles on either side of the railway, all Indians out. So they're the ones who brought in the same 5 years, the Indian Act, the RCMP, the residential schools were all brought in to imprison Indians. And so they were like a explicit agency of genocide. They're the ones they were the police arm of the residential schools. They'd round up the kids, they'd chase them down if they ran away from the death camps. So they're implicated. That's why they've been the major force in shutting down a lot of the work we've been trying to do for 20 years, because they're implicated. They're like the SS, right?
Kevin, you don't make a lot of friends, do you?
I get a lot of friends. You just never hear from them, right? You just hear from the well-paid ones.
You know, I really like the comment in the radio show about the church, right? And Jesus being on the cross, and we're worshiping the corpse. We're actually, right? Though it was brilliant, really, to think that all our religion was based on destroying something that was beautiful and just.
Mm-hmm. The cross didn't appear. If you look, and I studied archaeology, I was going to be an archaeologist. That's why I did anthro in my undergraduate. But there's no archaeological evidence of a cross in any architecture anywhere in the Roman Empire till around 250 to 300 AD. Before that, it was the symbol, the open-ended eternity symbol of the fish, right? So the Roman, I won't bore you, give me 30 seconds, but it's fascinating because the cross actually represents the grid. When the Roman army went into an area, that's why we have grid formations on streets and cities. They would create an army camp, and it was a grid formation. And it was the energy pattern of the Roman Empire. They would establish that all over Europe, and the cities would grow up from that. And that's what the cross is. It's the inside of a square, and it's the symbol of the Roman Empire, not of Christianity, because they killed the whole early Jesus movement and replaced it with Christendom, which is why we get genocide coming out of the followers of, quote, Jesus, right? But that's a whole story.
But this is why I think it's important, because it's a foundation where they've used our own psychology against us, right? This is a spiritual war,
Yes.
about taking away our power. So if we could go back to the Roman times and see how it's not a new program, just like you'd said with the indigenous people, I mean, they were taking them out of their homes and vaccinating them in the 1800s, you said? 1870 something? 18...
They've done that every year since 1874 when the Indian Act came in. They can't refuse medical treatment or vaccinations or they go to jail.
So, I mean, this sets up a paradigm of the government being dysfunctional, let's say, and having this control over us, but not only just since the 1800s, then we're going back to the Roman times.
Oh, yeah.
They've set up the paradigm in the Catholic Church, for example, to allow pedophilia, to allow the sex crimes, to allow the genocide.
It's not a crime. That's the point. Genocide is a tool of church and state. It's never been a crime. It's why did the Harper government lower the mandatory sentencing for child rape from 5 years to 1? It's now more of a crime to own a marijuana plant than it is to rape a child in Canada. Why is that? Because it's a tool of state. You've got to traumatize everyone at a young age to get them to obey, right? That's the purpose. It's why people never go to jail for raping children by and large. Yeah.
Well, and even with the school system now, right, they mask kids from grade 4 on. It's because the ones that are younger than grade 4 still are using their brain. They're still not allowing someone to put something on their face to smother them, right? That can't be controlled.
Well, you know very well what happens. Like depriving people of oxygen is making them stupid. And that's the point of all this, right?
Yeah.
Got to make people even dumber in all their reactions and their thoughts, everything, right?
So anyway, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the Republic of Canada, for all our people here in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Newfoundland. You know, we've really kind of came together all over Canada. We've had inquiries, and it's being together with other people that share similar values on health and our humanity that really gives us more strength. So thanks all for being here. Any other final questions? Kevin, are you still in the safe house, is what Diane says?
I'm somewhere in Canada.
Good. Astrotheology is what Norm says. I don't know. Religion's based on astrology. Oh, okay. That was, I guess, a private conversation you guys were having there. How long have we been programmed by the elite?
How long have we programmed ourselves? From the beginning. That's how a few people rule the many.
Yes.
They rule themselves.
And Tara makes a comment, there's organ damage that will last forever from wearing masks. Yes, I mean, the basic thing, as Kevin just said, I mean, we need oxygen to breathe and for cells. And anyway, so it's important to breathe and to live and to be the change and create your environment. So anyone know where to buy local produce in bulk between Miramichi? Okay, that's something for Norm. Okay, good. So thank you, Kevin, for being here. Thank you for, maybe you could announce different websites again for people to contact you, like.
Well, republicofcanada.ca and murderbydecree.com, and I'm angelfire101 at protonmail.com.
And the website for the radio show?
Oh, Sundays at 7 your time, bbsradio.com/here we stand.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for your mentorship, you know, in this whole process. We really appreciate not only what you're doing now, but, you know, all the pain and problems that you've had through your path. It's really paved the way for this movement. So
thank you, Dina. Thanks to everybody. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. So we'll upload this to the YouTube channel. So if you'd like to have that, you can email me. Everybody's saying thank you. So if you want to open your mic and say goodbye or say thank you, and then we'll close out. So again, thanks for all for being here. We'll be back again on Wednesday next week at 7.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks,
for all
Dina.
that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
Woohoo. Thank you, Dina. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dina. Have a great night.
Have a good night. Wow,
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks,
folks.
Dina.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.